Course 3, Lesson 13. We are adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. We're going to go through this pretty quickly and then look at some word problems as well. So first, what do we need to be able to add and subtract fractions? Well, the numerators can be different, but we definitely need common denominators. So when we look at these type of examples, 4/5 plus 2/5, 6/7 plus 5/7, 13/16 plus 7/16. What's good about these is that we have common denominators so that we can just add the numerators. So we would get 6/5, or you could say this is 1 and 1/5. We get 11/7, or 1 and 4/7, or we get 20/16, which we can simplify to, well, each of those has a 4 that can be taken out, which means we get 5/4, or 1 and 1/4. So common denominators, they are our friends. Even for subtracting, we need those common denominators, so we get 2/5, 6/10, or we need to reduce it, so 3/5, and we also get 6/16, which can be reduced to 3/8. So common denominators, then we can just deal with the numerators. Adding them together, we get 6/4, or 1 1/2. We get 0 for 9/10 minus 9/10. Okay? But what happens if we don't have common denominators, like 1/5 and 1/4? Well, if we want to add these together, I need a common denominator. That common denominator is, well, let's see. If I move this over, look, we have a common denominator of 20. All right, so let's use that idea with 1/4 plus 1/3. 1/4 plus 1/3, we need a common denominator, and that will be 12. Well, to get there, I need to multiply each of these fractions by 1, but not just 1, because that's not going to do anything. We need to change it to be helpful. So I can multiply by 3/3 for the first one, because 3 times 4 is 12. I'm still multiplying by just 1, but it's actually helpful. And 1/3 can be multiplied by 4/4 to get 4/12. So that I have common denominators, I add the numerators to get 7/12. Okay, so find that common denominator, and then multiply by 1 to get your next one. But what if we have mixed numbers? This is our procedure to go about that. We find a least common multiple. That's of these fractions out here. We're going to add those first, just like we would add the ones digit of a number before we add the tens. So we add the fractions. A least common multiple of 3 and 4 is 12. Well, we need to add the fractions. So 2/3 plus 2/4. We can multiply by 4/4 and 3/3. So we're actually adding together 8/12 and 6/12 to get 14/12, or we reduce that to 7/6, which is 1 and 1/6. And that's our third part. We changed that 14/12, or 7/6, to 1 and 1/6. Well, we write the fraction down below, 1/6, and we carry the 1, just like if we had something like 12 plus, 19. We do 2 plus 9, which is 11, and we carry that 1 because it's pushed over into that tens digit, and so we have 31. Similarly, we count the 1/6 and add the 1, so that we can add 1, 2, and 1, which is 4. So, is it in its simplest form, 4 and 1/6? It sure is. Okay? Or you could show it as a mixed fraction. Let's do it again. 1 and 5/6 plus 1 and 3/4. Least common multiple? Well, that will be 12. We need to add the fractions 5/6 plus 3/4. So we multiply 6 by 2/2 to get there, and 3/4 by 3/3. So we are actually adding together 10/12 plus 9/12, which is 19 over 12. We change it to a mixed number to say that's 1 and 7/12, so that we can write 7/12 down here and carry the 1. And 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. We see if it's simplest, and yes it is, 3 and 7/12. So, you can practice on these type of things. Remember, get that common denominator and see if you can add those mixed numbers. Common denominator, carry if you have over 1, and then add up those whole numbers. But what happens if you need to subtract? Okay, let's look at this example. 25 and 7/8 minus 18 and 2/3. Well, common or least common multiple would be 24. So I need to take that 7/8 and 2/3 and add those together. So I'm going to use that minus 2/3, I should have said, minus 2/3, get common denominators. So I'll take 8 times 8 over 8, multiply this one by 3 over 3, so that I am actually taking 21 over 24 minus 16 over 24. And we will actually get 5 over 24. Okay, so we subtract the fractions and get 5 over 24, and we subtract the whole numbers. 25 minus 18 is 7. So we get 7 and 5/24. So let's see if we got it right. I should be able to pull this over, and we see that we subtract, we get 5/24, and our final answer down there is 7 and 5/24. Okay. So practice some subtraction here, get some common denominators. All right. And practice those. Now, what happens, let me just give an example. What if instead of 7 and 1/3 for this one, I have 7 and 2/3? Something that's bigger than 1/2. Well, I am going to have to then borrow some from 7 to be able to subtract. Because if we look at this, 7 and 2/3 minus 1 and 1/2. Well, I can change that 2/3 to having a common denominator of 6. So I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2, multiply this by 3 over 3, and actually we are subtracting, I'll write it over here, 4 over 6 minus 3 over 6. But, oh sorry, I messed this up. I should have said something a little different. This one will actually work out just fine because we'll have 1/6 left. What I was trying to get to is if we have one that's bigger on the denominator than in the numerator. So let me give another example. Sorry about that. That one will actually work just fine. Okay, let's try this 1/2 minus 3/4. That's actually the one that I probably should have started with. So 3.5 minus 1 and 3/4. If we notice and change that 3.5 to having a common denominator of 2/4, and we're subtracting 1 and 3/4, well, how am I supposed to take 2/4 and subtract 3/4? Well, just like with our normal subtraction, something like 12 minus 19, or 12 minus 9, I would have to borrow this 1 and say we just have 12 minus 9, which is 3. Silly example, but we have to borrow, right? We have to borrow. And we're going to borrow from this 3. It becomes a 2, and we need to add an entire 1, so 4 over 4 to this. So instead of 2 over 4, we have 6 over 4. So that we can now subtract and get 3/4, subtract the whole numbers and get 1. So borrow. Borrow from that whole number and give yourself an entire other 1 to work with. Let's end with some word problems. Art students completed a survey about their favorite activity. Ceramics is the favorite of 2/5 of the students. Drawing is the favorite of 3/8. What fraction of the students chose either ceramics or drawing? So we want the total of these. So total means we're going to add 2/5 and 3/8. But unfortunately, those do not have common denominators. So I'm going to get a common denominator of, let's say, 40. So I'm going to multiply 5 by 8 over 8, multiply 3/8 by 5 over 5, and I'm actually adding together 16 over 40 plus 15 over 40. And when you add those together, you should get an answer of 31/40. Okay? Let's try another. A property owner donates 1/4 of an acre to a local park. After the donation, the size of the park is now 5/6 of an acre. Find the area of the park before the donation. So I want to know if we took away that donated 1/4, what would we have? Because that was the size of the park before. So I'm going to take 5/6 and subtract 1/4. Well, common denominator is 12, so we need to multiply by 2 over 2, 3 over 3, and I'm actually subtracting 10/12 minus 3/12. So the size of the park before the donation should be 7/12. 7/12 of an acre. All right. The end of a 2-inch by 4-inch piece of lumber is actually about 1.5 by 3.5 inches. It's not exactly 2 by 4. If one 2 by 4 is nailed on top of another 2 by 4, what will be the dimensions of the combined ends? So we're talking about these. The ends of the board is 1.5 by 3.5. Well, if we took another one and stacked it on top like this, what would be the new dimensions? Okay. Well, that means I have another 1.5 here. 1.5, there we go. And so the combined dimensions would be 3.5 by, well, we need to add up 1.5 and 1.5, so we would have 3 inches by 3.5 inches. Just combining those mixed numbers. Okay, remember you can add those 1/2 by 1/2 and get 2 halves. Well, that's just a whole 1. All right. Carpenter cut 15.5 inches from a 2 by 4 that was 92 5/8 inches long. How long was the resulting 2 by 4? So we have this board that was 92 5/8 inches long, and we're cutting 15.5 from it. So we take the 92 5/8 and we're going to subtract 15.5 because that's what was cut off. So we need common denominators, and let's use 8. So I just have to do 4 over 4. So this will result 5/8 minus 4/8 is 1/8, and I just need to do 92 minus 15. Well, that means I have to borrow. 12 minus 5 is 7. 8 minus 1 is 7. So my answer should be 77 1/8 inches. That's how long it was at the end. Well, I hope this was helpful for homework and for studying.